A sad reality of life is death. It's a thing. We're surrounded by it here at Elmwood Cemetery. And one of the other sad realities is that people of all ages pass away. And to me, and to a lot of folk, there's something inherently no more sad than the death of a child. But imagine that death containing a lot of weight to it. So much weight, in fact, that your death as a child would have impacts far-reaching in the way certain things are done in this world, and the way laws are written. And that is precisely what this episode is about. As we delve into a very dark, albeit thankfully short moment in time in the city of Memphis involving a children's home, and the story that surrounds the children who died in the care of this home and how they got there in the first place.
Every stone marks a story. Interesting stories, people like you and I. History that should be recounted. Here we toast those you may or may not know who have gone on before us and left behind their tales to be told. Here we'll be drinking with dead people.
For 26 years in the city of Memphis, there was this children's home. The Tennessee Children's Home Society was what it was called, and it was run by a woman by the name of Georgia Tan. And in the 26 years it operated, apparently some rather horrific things occurred. As I mentioned earlier, something is inherently wrong and really, really sad about the death of a child, or what circumstances brought them to a place like this. Of course, this is a marker dedicated to those children who had passed in the care of the Tennessee Children's Home Society, which thankfully no longer exists, but it was the subject of several made-for-television films, and it was the documentaries that were done on it. The 60 Minutes, I think, did a thing on it, as did Dateline and other places. And it all revolved around the woman who ran the joint, a place called a woman by the name of Georgia Tan. There were a lot of questions, you see, as to where these children came from. Some of them came through her care through legitimate means, as happens. It's the unfortunate part of childhood in some cases where you literally have an orphan. And this child would wind up here. Although there was something really wrong going on there. Some of these children had homes. They had families. Some of them had even been kidnapped to come here. The reason being, Georgia was making quite a bit of money off of this. And a lot of people had a hard time understanding how somebody who ran a children's home was chauffeured to work in a limousine. It was also said that she took 80 to 90% of any of the proceeds that came from the adoption of these children. It was far-reaching. It got into the notoriety of Hollywood. June Allison, actress there, she was one that adopted a child through this service. Joan Crawford was another one. Ric Flair, the wrestler, was involved in this in some way, shape, or fashion, and they were all horrified to find out what all was going on there. And the neglect and the things that happened to those children was really the most astonishing part about all of this. That's why here at Elmwood Cemetery this marker exists. It's a monument to those children who died in the care of those people who ran the Tennessee Children's Home Society. It's an infamous legacy. Sadly, those children that had passed, we don't know their names. The reason being is that Georgia Tan was apparently shredding all of the documents and destroying every bit of information that had about these children. And some of these children that survived and found themselves in other homes were trying to find their own past and their own histories. And they couldn't. It's a very dark time. It closed in 1949, December 10th, 1949. It finally was closed down. The investigations that would follow later would change the way adoption laws across the country would be implemented and used. Thankfully, it's tough enough for a young kid to not have a real home until they're adopted out, and I can only imagine what it must be like to spend your time in an orphanage, especially one that focused on neglect. That's the sad part. Here is a mass grave of the unknown children who passed away in the care of this children's home. Hence the toys and the thoughts. Why did I bring this up in a show called Drinking with Dead People? Because it bears mentioning that sometimes our past is very ugly. And sometimes we should do things to better it. And in this case, the deaths of these children certainly were not in vain. To that, I need a drink. Be sure and subscribe to the channel. Click the little notification bell. That way you'll know each time a new episode shows up. And when that does, join us as we wander the headstones of history and go drinking with dead people.